Hello and welcome back to the South Dakota Transplant. It's been a long time since we've chatted. Now it's time, where we're getting closer to the end of the season, to talk about where your garden could be at this point and wrapping things up. Maybe you're getting ready to plant some things for the fall. Let's get started. As you can see here, these are my black beans and my lima beans. I'm going to get in close down here to look at one of them. My beans, I think, have been my sacrificial crop this year. You might look in there closely and see a few bean pods in the black beans. The lima beans look about the same, but they've been pretty heavily chewed off. What chewed them off? In this case, deer, not rabbits. Notice that everything is chewed off from the top, not the bottom. My fence next year needs to be a little bit taller. Actually, a lot of it taller, probably close to about 6 feet tall in my community garden space to keep the deer out. My peppers look good. I'll be harvesting some peppers today. In fact, this is not the first day I've been harvesting peppers. I've been harvesting peppers for about a month now. I've got some strong poblano peppers coming in, Thai chili peppers. If we get down in here, we'll see some regular hot chili peppers. Over here, these are pepperoncini. Back over in here, some more pepperoncini. These that we saw a minute ago are Hungarian wax peppers. I like to can my peppers. This is a new crop for me this year. These are Greek pepperoncini, a little bit stronger, a little bit of a muskier flavor. And then back over here, a little bit slow this year. Don't think they're going to come in so well, is traditional jalapenos. One of the downsides of being in a community garden is it's a community space. These are some good looking cabbage plants, except you'll notice this one's missing. This one from this plant I harvested earlier this week. It's about 3/4 the size of a bowling ball. This one is gone. Somebody came into my garden and helped themselves. I have red cabbage coming in still, and a couple more green cabbages that I'm going to want to pick before somebody from the community helps himself again to my garden. I have had terrible trouble this year with my cucumbers. I've never had my cucumbers eaten before, but the deer are even getting the tops off my cucumbers. They're just now starting to fill in, starting to do their thing. And you can see that I'm getting some cucumbers in here, but rather than the bumper crop of cucumbers that I usually get and like to pickle, this year I'm just getting a little bit. These are my turnips in here. You might look at them and think they look a little scraggly. That's because I've already picked about 5 pounds of turnips out of this and frozen them. We'll talk in another episode about what do I do with my crops once I pick them. Freezing is one option and is a great option for turnips. Next to my turnips is zucchini. If you planted zucchini and you haven't been pulling zucchini out, then something's wrong. This is one of my zucchini, another one down here. It's been about 2 days since I've been up here. That one there was a baby zucchini the last time I was up here. Now it's giant because that's what zucchinis do. More zucchini. Over in here, I've got a couple different other kinds of squash. Spaghetti squash, that's coming along quite nicely. And I think there's some butternut squash in here as well. Squash is doing what it's supposed to do, starting to die back a little bit and letting the squash ripen. Finally, over in here, my tomatoes. You can see that there are some that are orange that are on the vine that I haven't picked yet. I picked about another 6 or 7 pounds of tomatoes today as well. Usually I'll put my tomatoes in the freezer until I have a giant batch of them, and then I put my tomatoes all up at once. I'll put them either into juice, I will put them up as just diced tomatoes, and those will be my starters for chili, for other soups, Drink the juice, use the diced tomatoes and other recipes over the winter. In the past, I have tried to grow eggplant. I've never been successful with it. I'm in a new plot this year for my garden in a brand new location up at Falls Park, new for me anyway. So I thought I would try one eggplant. This started off as a rescue. You may recall late in the spring when I talked about rescue gardening, this eggplant was a rescue. Now, in spite of the drought, in spite of everything that's happened this summer, with the lack of rain, with the heat, etc., this is a vibrant plant. And if you look underneath, you'll see some awesome eggplant. I have some new recipes to try for eggplant. One of them is a different way of making ratatouille, which I'm not usually a fan of, but this year I'm kind of excited to try. You just don't know what you're going to get out of your garden from even one plant. This spot here was supposed to have been originally carrots and beets, and when those didn't come in, it was to be herbs. Now if you look at it, there's a little bit of parsley right there and right there. Some basil has come in here, and 2 beets, 1 volunteer dill. Not enough for me to really do anything with, except try and figure out next year what went wrong so I don't make the same mistake again. That's something you should consider every year when you garden. What worked, what didn't, and what can I or should I do differently next year? I already know my fence needs to be about 6 feet tall. At home, my harvest is rather hit and miss. So I went ahead and pulled my onions today. It's Labor Day weekend. They're going to dry outside. Hopefully it's supposed to be dry for the next several days. So they'll dry down, put the skin on that we're used to seeing, and you see most of them already have that already. My leeks, wow, what a harvest of leeks. I've pulled them because they're starting to put seed pods on. You can see that they really rooted, really did well. That's one pile. There's another pile of leeks. If you're wondering what to do with leeks, leek and potato soup is excellent. Leeks can substitute for onions in a lot of things, including even leek rings like you would with onion rings. A little bit milder than onions, but they are amazingly good and healthy for you. My pie pumpkins, my sweet pumpkins, I've got 7 of them sitting out here right now. You can see them kind of peeking through. 7 is a pretty good batch for this amount of space. I've got one down in here that just recently came on and is going to try and come in by the end of the year, so the pie pumpkins did well. My potatoes were in this space. They did okay. This is the area where I had potatoes in the sacks. They did fine. They produced 2 or 3 potatoes per plant, so about 4 to 6 potatoes per sack. Not great, but for my first time, I'll take it. This is my strawberries. Strawberries didn't do well at all. I am hoping that it was due to the heat, and my understanding is that it was due to the heat this summer. Strawberries just can't handle the heat. So I'll try again next year. Not going to get rid of this idea quite yet. At least want to give it one more go. This isn't completely unusual. To get a fall crop of rhubarb. I plucked the biggest parts off of these rhubarb in the spring, and usually I'll get a double crop of rhubarb, so I'll be able to pluck these, cut these off here in the next couple of weeks, and make some rhubarb lemonade, things like that. Over in here is where I have my other batch of potatoes. They're about ready for me to dig in and pull them up. They're starting to die back. Usually you want to leave your potatoes in the ground until they start to die back. Need a couple of days of dryness so I can go in and get these. Remember in the spring I planted Brussels sprouts with these forks around them. Well, the forks didn't do any good. All of the Brussels sprouts are gone thanks to the rabbits in my neighborhood. Clearly they know when my dog is outside and when he's not, because the Brussels sprouts, I had a dozen of them in here and was really hoping they would do well. And I have no Brussels sprouts. Transplanted some horseradish over the summer, and it's coming back and doing very well. Looking forward to horseradish next year, particularly from this bunch back here. Planted this 2 years ago. This should be ready for me to start digging up next year and grinding some of my own horseradish. So that's pretty much it for this season on vegetables with the South Dakota transplant. I'm going to give my garden somewhere between a C and a C plus for if I had to give it a grade. You didn't see my tomatoes. They did about average for tomatoes. It's South Dakota, and tomatoes typically do pretty well. Given the drought, given the heat that we had, given the strong winds that we had this summer that we've talked about previously, I think a C to a C plus is probably about the best that we could have expected. Some things did really, really well. My tomatoes did pretty well. My peppers did well. My leeks and onions did very well. Obviously, I didn't get any carrots. I didn't get any beets. My turnips did well. Zucchini would do well, probably without much help of any kind anywhere. I could use some new fencing next year to keep things out of my beans and my lima beans, and to keep things out of my cucumbers. Somehow I need to keep the heat down on my strawberries. So all in all, about a C plus. Gardening's not done yet, though. I still will need to clean up and do some fall treatments and start doing some lessons learned for next year. For this season, for this episode of Vegetables on the South Dakota Transplant, I am the South Dakota Transplant.